So for the past year or so, I think I've been doing reviews every time a new core set comes out on 5 cards that I feel are really underrated that people are really sleeping on. And in today's video, we're going to do the exact same thing for Chaos Impact. If you guys would like to purchase any of the cards that I mentioned in today's video, or just any cards in general, make sure to check out tcgplayer.com using my link in the description below. The first card that I want to talk about is actually one that I did a video on when it was first announced a couple months ago, and that is Hop Ear Squadron. Now, why am I mentioning this card again? Well, I'm mentioning it again because it has a new piece of support in the set that we didn't know previously because it's a world premiere card. So first, what does this thing do? Well, it is a wind beast monster, and it's an effect monster, obviously. 300 attack, 600 defense, and it is level 2, which is very, very important. Also, it is a tuner monster, which is very important as well. This thing says during your opponent's main phase, as a quick effect, you can target one face-up monster you control, special summon this card from your hand, and if you do, immediately after this effect resolves, synchro summon one synchro monster using only this card you control and that target. Keep in mind this card is in fact a hard once per turn effect, so if you have multiple copies in your hand, you can't just use all of them on one turn and just keep summoning synchro monsters. And when this card was first revealed, I didn't really know exactly where it might fit in. I mean, clearly it's a little bit hard to use this card because it's a card that's only good when you're going first, but doesn't actually help set up your board. But as long as you could M like a level 5 monster on the board, and whatever deck could summon level 5 monsters, you could theoretically summon Black Rose Dragon on your opponent's turn. In the past, you've been able to do that sort of thing with cards like Formula Synchron, but Formula Synchron in 2019 isn't super easy to make anymore, so I think a hand trap like this is an interesting take on the idea. But then a totally new card, and I'm not counting this as a separate entry on the list, it's sort of tied in with Hop Ear Squadron, but a totally new card was announced, and this is a really cool way to take advantage of Hop Ear Squadron in a new way that we didn't know previously. So Desert Locust is a level 6 tuner synchro monster, and it packs 2 very interesting effects, both of which are very clearly designed to work in tandem with Hop Ear Squadron. The first effect says if this card is synchro summoned, the turn player discards one card. You can only use this effect of Desert Locust once per turn. The main idea here, pretty obviously, is that you use Hop Ear Squadron with a level 4 monster you control on your opponent's turn to force them to discard one card. That effect is pretty cool, but if that's all this card has, it probably wouldn't be talking about it. What really made me interested though is the second effect that says once per chain during your opponent's main phase, you can, as a quick effect, immediately after this card resolves, synchro summon using this card you control. Basically, the idea here is that you use Hop Ear Squadron with a level 4 monster to summon Desert Locust. That then forces your opponent to discard a card, and then later on in the turn, or immediately in the turn, whenever you really want to, you can use Desert Locust to synchro summon another synchro monster. This is a really cool idea. You can synchro climb into a bigger synchro monster, and that's gonna be a little tricky, right? Because you'll not only have to have the Hop Ear Squadron in hand, you'll not only have to have the level 4 monster on field, but if you want to synchro summon with the Desert Locust, you'll have to have an additional non-tuner monster on the board. So you could have a level 1 monster and summon that Black Rose Dragon. You could have a level 2 monster and summon any number of really strong level 8 synchro monsters. You could even have a level 3 monster and make like Vermilion Mech or whatever that card is. But in general, you're probably going to want to end your turn with a level 4 monster and then a level 1 or level 2 monster. Now, how often will that happen? Well, that's the main issue with Hop Ear Squadron. It was the main issue when I first talked about the card a couple months ago, and I think that's the big puzzle you have to solve here, because as I've said before, you should not build your deck around playing Hop Ear Squadron. You should find a deck that already wants to end the field with these setups and then add the Hop Ear Squadron in there. And like I said a couple months ago, that deck might not exist right now, but it could exist in the future. Both Hop Ear Squadron and Desert Locust are 2 really big cards that I feel a lot of people just don't even know exist. I know that Hop Ear Squadron made a little bit of waves when it was first announced, but I haven't seen a lot of discussion about either of these cards, and I know that a lot of people, when Desert Locust got revealed, had no idea why it was even in the set. Clearly they had not known that Hop Ear Squadron was in there as well, because the cards are obviously meant to go together, but I think that these are 2 cards you want to keep your eye on in the coming months. If we ever get a deck that can consistently and easily end on a level 4 and a level 1 or 2 monster, these are definitely 2 cards that you'd want to consider for that strategy. And in Chaos Impact, there are several new Tenyi cards, but the one that I want to focus on is the new Tenyi Spirit for the main deck, and this card is really cool. So if you don't know, because the Tenyis weren't very competitive this last format, it's an archetype full of monsters that can special summon themselves for free, and then also have hand and graveyard effects if you control non-effect monsters, and overall I think it's a really interesting idea. Pure Tenyi decks really did struggle last format. I mean, we saw Tenyi Vishuda actually see a ton of play in Orcus variants, but I think this new card and the other cards in the set really do make the deck a lot more viable. So what this one does in your hand or graveyard, if you control a face-up non-effect monster, is that you can banish it to special summon any Tenyi monster from your deck, probably in most cases either Vishuda or the tuner monster that they have. This powerful effect does come at a price though. You are locked into just worm monsters for the rest of the turn, but I think that's fine because not just the Tenyi monsters, but there's plenty of other really strong worms that you could be playing. Things like the Yang Zing synchro monsters are really strong. You also have Mare and all those types of cards. Overall, I think a card like this is a really important piece to a Tenyi deck, and I'm not sure if the deck will be super viable, but I wouldn't be surprised if that deck took a couple regional tops. I don't know if you're supposed to play it as a going second deck or a going first deck, but it seems like a deck that wants to go second, wants to break boards, so this card alongside the other new Tenyi monsters in Chaos Impact really do seem to help out a pure Tenyi strategy. The next card that I want to talk about is Jelly Cannon, and I'm just going to say right now, some of you when you saw the thumbnail, if you know what this card was, you might have thought I was joking, you might have thought I wasn't being serious, but I actually believe this card could be a cool addition to very specific strategies. What does this card do? Well, it is a normal trap card, and the artwork is very confusing. I have no idea what's going on there, but the main effect here is when a monster declares an attack, target one monster on the field, shuffle it into the deck. Now, I know compared to some of the Mirror Force cards like Stormy Mirror Force and Johnny Mirror Force, this card might not look that viable, but there is a key reason I like this card over the Mirror Force cards, and it's simply because this card, unlike those cards, can be used aggressively. So no, this card cannot take out an entire board like Stormy Mirror Force, but one of the biggest problems with cards like the Mirror Force cards is that they're completely reliant on your opponent doing something, in those cases attacking you or attacking you directly. However, in the case of Jelly Cannon, you can actually use it when your own monster attacks, and then you can use it to get rid of a big opposing threat, and that is a really cool thing that a lot of people are overlooking here. I like this card because you can use it with Trap Trick as well. It is a normal trap card, which is really cool, and I know that with Mirror Force and all the Mirror Forces really, you can do that too, but what I like with this card, if you look at it in like Paleos playing Trap Trick or Altergeist playing Trap Trick, is that this is a card that you can set with Trap Trick during the end phase if your opponent didn't make any threatening plays, that you can special summon a Paleo or special summon Multi-Faker, which does happen a lot if you've played those decks. And I know that you could do that with other cards, things like Compulsory Evacuation Device or Infinite Impermanence, but even those cards sometimes aren't that useful, where Jelly Cannon actually can be used aggressively on your turn after your opponent's end phase to take out an opposing threat while you're trying to set up your board. I know it seems like a joke, I know it seems like a weird card for me to be a fan of, but I really like Jelly Cannon a lot. I'm not sure if it's going to be super viable right now, but it is sort of shuffling back removal, which is a really good way to get rid of cards. And even though yes, it does target, and yes, it might be worse than Compulsory Evacuation Device, there might be a format sometime in the future here where you want extra copies of Compulse and you want extra things to set off of the Trap Trick. Compulse is obviously really strong against extra deck monsters, but sometimes you want to get rid of a main deck monster, and Jelly Cannon in some cases is actually a better option in those scenarios. The next card is Spiritual Entanglement, and this is a really wild option. I know this card might seem inferior to some other choices, very similar to Jelly Cannon, but once again, I think this card could be valuable in certain matchups. So what does this thing do? Well, it targets one face-up monster your opponent controls, and it gets banished until the end phase. Also, it is a hard once per turn effect. Basically, this is a generic form of Farfa of the Burning Abyss, a card I'm sure many of you guys are familiar with, a card that was very competitive and even is still pretty good in 2019 if you're playing like a Burning Abyss deck, but overall, this is a normal spell version of that card, and that is really intriguing to me. Now, what would you play this thing in? Well, you would play it in a deck that wants to go second, wants to OTK the opponent, and you'd play it in addition to things like Mind Control, and I think that's really interesting here, because just like in the case of Jelly Cannon, this card doesn't have to be better than Mind Control, because don't get me wrong, it is not better than Mind Control, but if you want extra copies of a card like Mind Control for certain matchups, this could be the go-to option, or could be a possible tech option to consider. And finally, the very last card that I want to talk about is Gallant Graynet, and I want to tell you right now, we're not going to spend too much time talking about this card, because in a few days I'm going to make an entire video talking about all the different things this card can do, because this is actually, I mean, it's going to sound crazy, but it's actually my favorite card out of Chaos Impact. It is a very, very cool card. So what does this do? Well, it is a rank 4 monster, a generic rank 4 monster. It takes any 2 level 4s, and it has 2 different effects. You can attach one material from this card to do one of the following things. You can either add add a rock monster from your deck to your hand, or you can special summon one rock monster from your hand in face down defense position. You probably won't use the special summoning the rock monster from your hand ability in most cases, but where this card is really intriguing is the fact that it can search any rock monster, and that's really cool. So it's sort of like a Gallant X for rock monsters, but it has one key difference that is very important, and that's that this is a generic rank 4 monster where the Gallant could only be used in machine decks because it took 2 machines to summon. Why I like this so much, and the fact that I like that it's a rank 4 monster that's completely generic, is that you can play in a deck with not many rock monsters. If you just have one rock that you're trying to search out, you can play this card as long as you have other level 4s. For example, and I'm going to go over a whole bunch of rocks that you could potentially search out with this card, but the biggest one that people are talking about is that this thing can search Nibiru. So if you're playing a deck like Lunalights, you're playing any deck that can put out a lot of level 4 monsters, you can now search Nibiru on the first or second turn, whatever you want to, and that is really cool. Like I said, this card is going to get its own video, so I won't spend too much more of your time talking about this card, because I'm going to spend an entire discussion video sort of breaking down all the cool things that you can search with this effect, because there are many cool cards that happen to be rock monsters, but it is still a big sleeper card from the set, so I wanted to mention it at least a little bit in today's video. The Halloween themed card of today is Sharanui Solitaire. So if you guys remember, I'm trying to review one zombie monster or one Halloween themed card for every single day in October. I'm a little bit behind, maybe a lot of bit behind, even though I did a video with 10 of them, but this is the one for today's video. I will make sure I catch up before the end of the month though, because it has something pretty special planned for Halloween, but this is a very good card. So basically this is a level 4 monster that you can tribute to special summon a Unizombie from your deck. Sure, it has other effects and other targets, but the main thing we're looking at here is that it can special summon a Unizombie, and that is really awesome because when this card was released, and even still to this day, this is a 1 card either rank 4 monster or level 8 synchro monster or link 2 monster, and that's really awesome. So the main combo here is that you can use this to special summon Unizombie and then use that Unizombie to send a Mizuki to the graveyard, and normally, I mean, that's already really good, but what's really cool about this in particular is that because you have this thing in your graveyard, you automatically have something to special summon with that Mizuki, and then you can instantly make any number of extra deck options. This is a really competitively viable card, and it is still played in modern zombie decks, so if you're playing a zombie deck and you want to add more cards to your deck, I'm sure you already know about this card, but if you don't, you definitely should have it in there. Anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed today's discussion video on 5 Chaos Impact Yu-Gi-Oh cards that are better than you think they are. I hope someone at least tries some of these cards out. I think they're really cool, and in the past I've actually been pretty correct on a lot of my choices. A lot of the cards that I have guessed to be underrated actually ended up making it into competitively viable strategies, so at least give these cards a second look. Anyway though, I'll see you guys later. Make sure if you want to purchase any of these cards to use my link to tcgplayer.com. It'll be in the description below, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.